Oh, Lex Media is here. I wonder if Lex Media wants to record it too.
Shall I let them talk?
Yeah, let them talk in case they want to be co-hosts. Or maybe it's Rick who wants to see us show his movie.
Ah, so welcome, Lex Media. If you're interested in unmuting, you can now.
And Lex Media, let us know if you need to be a co-host. Although we are recording the meeting, I'm not sure we can both record the meeting. Oh, yes, we can. We're recording onto a computer. I think that works. But let us know what you want. Oh, and Todd, congratulations on becoming a member of town meeting.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Let's bring the champagne.
There's actually, it's still not settled in our precinct. Are you aware of that?
No.
I
Oh,
mean,
you had a tie, right?
well, yeah, I was the second highest vote getter, but then the bottom two, there's one position that's, I think, 1 year or 2 year, and
2 years,
and all the others are 3. And so I guess the way it gets settled is the precinct town meeting members who are not tied all vote for one of those 2 people on the bottom.
Oh,
And that vote is happening just before, half an hour before town meeting starts on the 20th.
on the 20th. Oh, wow. So they won't even know on the 15th during our precinct meetings.
No, they won't.
Oh, that's interesting. I
7
didn't know that.
o'clock, 6:30 or 7 o'clock on the 20th before the town meeting starts.
Well, at least you know you're on, because there's a lot of reading and this year has a lot of hot topics.
It'd be fascinating to know the count of environment forward people on town meeting now. Like, is it 20? Is it 40?
I don't know. There's a lot of things about sense of town meeting I want to learn about, but so far I've read 24 documents and I have 4 left to go, but I will have read everything that's readable by the time town meeting starts.
Yeah, I like to get her order and then I watch and read in order, since I don't carry over a lot of memory.
Yeah.
So I kind of go in order. And then, I mean, I'm reading all the emails as they come in about 34. Of course, we need to get 26 passed. That's the big push this year for us, for this environmental climate group, and 40.
Yeah. I've been reading the bylaws and all the other stuff they give to new town meeting members. So I've had one reaction to the documents so far that I've honestly been shocked about. There's almost no use of graphics in any of the documents. And, if they want to convey so that the town meeting members understand who hires who and who reports to who and what various procedures are, you could sum up probably 60 of the pages I've read in about 4 pages of graphics.
Yeah.
It would make it a lot more accessible for people that, had a hard time pouring through all those documents.
Well, Todd, I'm sure the town meeting member association group, which is probably I'm not sure who put together that town meeting document you're talking about. I think it's the town meeting association.
About half of what I'm talking about is the town, maybe 2/3, and maybe a third is town meeting member association. So both entities, I think, could make changes. So maybe I can contribute something to that process.
I think all voices and willingness to do something is welcome. Hi, Paul and Pierre and Francine and Pam, and here comes Ken. Can I just, Janice, are you called HeatSmart coaches or energy coaches or HeatSmart energy coaches?
I'm never quite sure. I think we're HeatSmart advisors. I think we call ourselves different things. Ken, what do you call yourself? You have to unmute.
Energy advisor or energy coach, but I guess preface it by it's part of the HeatSmart program. So, yeah. So
Okay.
I guess if you need one phrase, HeatSmart energy coach is good.
Okay, that'll work. And Mary, you saw the message from Lex Media? Okay.
Yes.
Are you planning on posting the recording?
Yes, we're gonna have the recording be part of so people don't have to go to two places. If this is what they want to see, they could see the recording in addition. But if you mean two places, Lex Media and LexCAN, yes. Why not? Because it's nice to have it up on our LexCAN YouTube channel, where much of what's gone on in the past year is on, and we have past years to still post some great lectures with Bill Muma. I think we have one of his up, and some of the other fantastic folks that were willing to come and speak to us. So I want to make sure anybody can go back and look at all of those. Okay, I'm going to get started. Anyone who comes in after 7 will be coming in the middle of the movie. We have a really packed agenda, so I just want to get going. And of course, everybody can rewatch part of the movie that they've missed. Welcome everyone to LexCAN's monthly meeting in March 2023. We're very excited to present tonight, where we'll see actual examples of building using green construction techniques. We are filming tonight, so if you want to turn off your video, you can do that. We want to thank Rick Dorrington from Lex Media, who created the film you're about to watch last year during Earth Day in May. And then we have our homeowners. We like to thank Todd and Deborah Burger and Rachel and Jacob Summers, who are here, who are the subject of this movie. And Lex Media filmed both of their renovations and additions. And we're really excited that they had these two examples for us to see, and that they're willing to talk to us about that. After the movie, Janice Litwin will take over the meeting, and the homeowners are available to answer any of your questions. You can put questions in the chat if you want. You can raise your hand. We're going to stay gallery view just so we feel like a nice community. At about 8 o'clock, when we're done doing questions and answers with the homeowners, Maggie Peard, our Sustainability and Resilience Officer, will come on, show a few slides about the HeatSmart program, which was kicked off, I believe, on January 4th this year. And we have a couple of our HeatSmart coaches, heat energy coaches. We're still working out the name. Who will be here to also answer your questions. These are the folks who have taken a course and are available for town members to call up if they want some information about changing over to heat pumps, and it's time. So anyway, we're going to turn over to start watching the movie. Thank you for joining us.
One other very quick note is I suspect more people will be joining at 7:30 because some people will have watched the movie separately. So,
Yep.
My name is Todd Burger. I live here with my wife, Deborah. I lived in Lexington for the last 30 2 years. We have a barn behind the house, and the barn has been on this property for, a barn has been on the property, we were told, for about 150 years. This particular post and beam barn has been there for 85 years. The barn was really falling apart. We had a leaky roof. We had a resident raccoon I used to run into in the barn on several occasions. We have 2 electric cars, so we needed a new electrical service at the barn. The barn needed a new roof and many other things, and we said, if we're going to do this, let's do it right. And so we spent a lot of time planning what we wanted, and we had several goals. One was we did want to preserve the post and beam barn. The cheapest thing to do probably would have been to tear it down, but the post and beam construction was attractive, was functional, and if we could preserve that, we wanted to. Secondly, we wanted to end up with something that was environmentally responsible. So for us, that meant a building that consumed very little energy, and also a building that involved using the least amount of toxic materials, if possible, none. And so that drove a lot of design decisions. We also wanted the building to end up like it looked like it belonged there, like it had been there for decades, that fit with the house, that fit with the property, and that fit with the neighborhood. And that also drove several design decisions. From the very beginning, my wife and I wanted to take back about 4,000 hours of work, probably me more than my wife. And I have a lot of carpentry skills, electrical skills, and others that you'll hear about as I describe the project. And so we needed to find a builder that would be willing to work with a homeowner that wanted to do that amount of work. And we also needed to find a builder that was not shy about using some newer technologies that would make the building be more energy efficient and have less toxic materials than is typically the case. And we found a great builder to work with us, Platt Builders out of Groton. They had a bunch of subcontractors. I also had some subcontractors working for me, and then I did quite a bit of the work. So part of the aim of the project was to take a building that you could only park 2 cars in end to end. You couldn't close the doors properly. They were old style, big barn sliding doors, hence the visiting raccoon, to something that was really an airtight building, that the cars were well protected and in a warm place for the winter, and make the space above the parking area usable. And so our idea was to have an apartment above that. Someday, my wife and I think, maybe we'll live in the apartment and we'll rent the house, or if we're here in our late 80s and 90s, maybe we'll have someone helping us to stay in place in the house, but a caregiver who could be living in the apartment. In the meantime, the idea was to rent the apartment to give us some more income to be able to stay in town, and to do this all environmentally in a responsible fashion. So for us, that meant, for starters, nothing combustible in the building. We didn't want natural gas, we didn't want propane, I didn't want gasoline in the cars, I didn't want yard tools that had gasoline. So we said we're going all heat pumps in the building, all electric yard tools. And we started talking about insulation approaches, and I'm not a big fan of foam products which can give you high R values, but they do have off-gassing, they do have use petrol products in the manufacturing, so I wanted something that was not that. And we ended up with, the other thing we were after was a complete insulation envelope around the building, which very few buildings in Lexington have. We have it in the barn, our neighbor's house now has it. When you do that, you eliminate what's called thermal bridging, where the heat or cool in the house goes right through the studs to the outside of the house. With an insulation envelope like we have that's continuous, you not only get a better insulated building, it's much quieter inside. If there's any busy roads near you, you don't hear any of that noise. And so we have rock wool on the outside, 2 layers of 2-inch rock wool on all the walls. In the roof, we have 2 layers of 3-inch rock wool. It's called comfort board. But then we have another 6 inches of dense packed cellulose in all the walls. We have 8 inches of rock wool batts between the rafters and the ceiling. So we have R values that are well in excess of the stretch energy code requirements, much less the old energy code. We have R33 or 35 in the walls and R52 or 53 in the roof. We also have an insulated floor And we even have what's referred to as a thermal break between the part of the concrete pad of the garage floor that extends outside the doors so that the coldness or the heat does not transmit inside the building in peak temperatures or low temperatures. So all of those things gave us a low energy cost for the building. There's also every single light fixture inside the building, outside the building, and in the apartment are all LED light fixtures. There's a full laundry in the apartment, and the dryer, most electric dryers require a 240 volt circuit, and usually a fairly high amp, usually 30 amp circuit. We have a heat pump dryer. It requires only a 15 amp 120 circuit to run. It has its own condensation drain, so it does not throw the moisture back into the apartment area. And it's worked so well, our tenants have just ordered them for their new house. We also have a heat pump hot water heater. So it's not a straight electric heater. And that heat pump hot water heater is located in the lower section of the barn, in the car parking area. And all of those things have produced a roughly 1,100 square foot apartment that has a total energy bill for heat, cooling, lighting, hot water of about $1,500 a year. With a single tenant in there, we'd probably see something closer to $1,200, and with 4 people in there, it'd be closer to $1,600, $1,800, but that is for the whole year, everything. Some of it is fairly innovative, but honestly, there are places in the country that do more of this kind of thing than is currently happening in Massachusetts. There was a lot of planning there. I will tell you, there are lots of builders and lots of HVAC contractors, heating, ventilation, air conditioning contractors that don't know about the things that we did. For example, one of the things that Platt Builders helped us with to get a tight seal on an existing building is very hard in a renovation project. It's very difficult to do that. However, what we did, every single place that a wire or a pipe or a tube of any sort or an air duct goes through the wall surfaces or the roof surfaces, there's not just a flashed gasket, it is a rubberized, that lasts for 50 plus years seal, tight seal on every penetration into the building. As a result of that, we've got a test. A typical house leaks about the equivalent of 4 whole air changes per hour. That's how much air is around doors or under doors, around windows, pipe entrances. That's what a typical house does that was built even in the 1990s, early 2000s. So when you get down below 2, that's pretty good. When you get down below 1.5, it's really good. In brand new construction, spending the maximum amount of money to get it, you'll be lucky to get down to about 0.4, 0.5. We got down to 1.1, and then we found an air leak under a door, which we've since fixed. We haven't had it retested, but my guess is that we're probably at about 0.9 air changes per hour, which just means you're not heating air in winter and then letting it leak out through someplace, or you're not cooling air in summer and letting it leak out. It's a very tight building. The building also got what they call a HERS rating, H-E-R-S rating. Our builder had never seen a HERS rating below 45 for a renovation project. We got a HERS rating of 39. And it wasn't by accident. It was by doing all these things in planning. I mean, for example, before any finishes were in the apartment, all of the walls were caulked and sealed so there was no air movement between the apartment and the garage. They were actually sealed on both sides of that envelope. So there was, to answer your earlier question, there was a lot of work done to think through what materials we were going to use, how they were going to be installed, and what was going to be done in those installations. And our builder, and it's important to say this, I think, you need to find a builder who is willing to take the time to do it right, which does not mean that you're necessarily going to spend more, but you're going to deal with a builder who doesn't mind reading the manual, the inspection, the specifications for how to use this new material they haven't seen before. When we started the project, before we started the project, and we had settled on that outside insulation called Comfort Board, our builder called the manufacturer, set up a date and time, had the manufacturer's rep come to their offices and train their crews in the do's and don'ts of doing the installation. A lot of builders just want to come and do what they did 6 months ago at some other place with some standard material they've used before. But you do that planning right, and it went very well. Our siding is all Nova Scotia fast growth cedar, pre-primed at the factory, same as we have installed in our house some years ago. Our house hasn't been painted in 17 years. We had a painter here looking at it, and he just refused to paint it because he said, your trim needs some painting, but your siding's good for another 5 or 10. You do the right planning and install it right, you're going to end up with lower costs. On the energy side, yes, I think it is a replicable model. In fact, it's so replicable that when our neighbors saw this building go up, they changed their plans and got rid of natural gas and said, you know what, we're going to heat pumps, and we're going to this outside insulation envelope on top of inside insulation, and we're going to drive our energy costs way down. And they found they're actually using a different builder than we had, and they are doing a great job using those same materials to have that same positive outcome. I think, you know, if you look at what's going to happen to what's already happening today, but even irrespective of current political events, what's really going to happen over the next 10 or 20 years to natural gas and propane prices, people that aren't looking at air source heat pumps today are really missing the boat. There's a great opportunity to reduce energy costs with air source heat pumps. And people who looked at them 8 years ago, it's time to look again, because the air source heat pump, for example, that we have on this building, it's called a hyperheat whole house heat pump. So I'm not talking about a mini split, but where you have to put 4 or 5 on a building, but a single whole house unit that can feed zoned units within the house, the potential to drive down your energy costs. Those things can now operate to 5 degrees below zero efficiently. If you have 2 days of the year where it goes below that, they have electric grid override. It's still an enormous savings over having natural gas or propane. We did get some state energy rebates related to the windows, the heat pump, and a number of the other energy measures that we took. There's one thing I haven't mentioned that actually got a lot of interest on Earth Day in May in Lexington. In fact, I would say almost every single tour of people that I took through the building that day stopped and took a picture of this thing that was introduced to us as a technology by our neighbors. And I looked into it, and it's a little device that gets added between the water line for the washing machine and the washer itself. And what it does is it takes the incoming water to the washer and it creates ozone in the water. And as a result of that, you don't need detergent. Well, from a landlord point of view, I like the idea of no one having to haul detergent and maybe spill detergent on my nice wooden floor in the apartment. The tenant liked it because actually ozone-treated water does a better job cleaning than laundry detergent. But that also meant they didn't have to pay for and lug those bottles of laundry detergent into the apartment, or to put that plastic into the recycling stream or the trash stream, wherever it would end up. Sometimes you put it in recycling and it doesn't even go there. So it's a little box about 6 inches by 18 inches by 3 inches, and it's been working flawlessly. And I would highly recommend people look at that for their own. And it's an add-on you can get. You don't need a different kind of washing machine. But it's another environmental benefit of the building. Well, I certainly hope that in the next decade we see a massive switch from oil and propane in this town and natural gas to heat pumps. And I hope Lexington is, because of LexCAN and Mothers Out Front and other groups, Energize Lexington, is one of the towns leading the whole state in that direction. It'll be good for the town, it'll be good for the residents, it's good for air quality, it'll be good for the country, and it'll be good for the planet. And it'll be good for people's pocketbooks as well. Even without the rebates that are out there, some of the things I've talked about have really fantastic paybacks. You know, we could have an apartment out there that was consuming 2 to 3 times what we're going to be paying in electric bills in terms of energy costs for the building. When people start looking at what their bills are and they add up their electric bill and their oil bill or their natural gas bill, and then they think about what it would be like with a heat pump. Oh, and by the way, I didn't mention one other thing in the building. if you build a really tight building, there's something else that you really ought to have, and it's called either an energy recovery ventilation unit or a heat recovery ventilation unit. And what it does is, it's good to bring in fresh air to a building, but it's good to do it in a controlled way where you don't lose the coolness of the apartment in the summer or the heat of the apartment in the winter. And a heating or energy recovery unit brings in fresh air, and there's a transfer of energy between the outgoing air and the ingoing air. So that unit has an HRV with HEPA grade filters on it. So not only is it a low energy cost building, but it has some of the best air quality of buildings in town. I think the only other building I know of that's got as good air quality is the new elementary school the town built, thanks to our selectmen and the town's energy advisory groups, which also has HEPA filters on it. But that was another element in the design.
I'm Joshua, and this is Rachel, and this is our eco build. We're doing a home renovation project, and we're trying to incorporate as many different green features in the way that we construct it, and ultimately the finishes we decide on inside it. I really credit Rachel with pushing me to think about a lot of these things more critically. She's started from the outside in the landscaping and how we've incorporated a lot into the property. And as we started to go on a project to really rethink the way that we were living in the house, you challenged me to think about every single thing we did. How could we better insulate the home? How could we really move to 100% electric-based living? And ultimately, how can we choose products to finish the house off that really have minimal impact on the environment?
Well, I'll add to that, as we're making our house bigger, trying to think about how to balance that and not have a bigger impact as a result. I think one of the things, so we put geothermal heat into our house 10-ish years ago when it wasn't very common, and had the realization that the way we did it with an existing house was not necessarily cost effective, but we'd had an oil spill at our old house, so we were going more for karma at the time. But in looking at the numbers, we wondered why more people weren't doing this for new construction when it actually did make financial sense, and just that the knowledge wasn't out there. So as we got into this project, listening to more things, terrible things happening in the world, I was like, what else can we do to, what other things are people not thinking of?
And I actually don't think going green is a new trend. I think people who are kind of setting the trend 20, 30 years ago really kind of paved the way. And I think what's happening now is there's almost a dire situation where we all realize a little bit better the impact we're having, and we all think about maybe some smaller things we can do to reduce that impact. And so while it's not a new trend, maybe it's a blossoming trend, but ultimately anything we can do, not just to better our own experience, but also the experience of others by teaching, by educating, that's important to us. I think with each piece of the project you do, you learn something that just wasn't obvious. And so for us, we're going to full electrification in the house. That means a significant draw of electricity. Replacing fossil fuels, you're replacing those with electricity. Now we source all of our electricity through the town of Lexington. We use the green option, so we feel good about at least offsetting our electric usage with green energy, but that doesn't mean we're not using a lot of it.
Yeah.
And I think it's hard for people to necessarily understand that by moving to geothermal or to air source heat pumps, you're actually going to use more electricity, but you got to use it the right way. And so we've really spent a lot of time thinking about how we're going to best understand our electric usage. So one of the really cool things we're putting into the house is not just solar and not just battery backups, but we're installing load centers that are called smart load centers. And they're from a company called span.io. And these load centers allow us to actually look down to a circuit by circuit level and understand every single piece of equipment and what it's drawing in terms of energy usage. We can monitor it. We can know when things aren't working well. We can also remotely control them and shut them off. And knowing that our grid is less stable today, as energy spikes and maybe the grid falters, when we switch to our battery backup, these smart load centers will automatically take over and start to prioritize different circuits in the house and shut off the things we don't need, so we can maximize the duration that we can exist in a power outage. So things like that, we didn't know 6 months ago. We've learned along the way, but we've really tried to incorporate them as we learn them. And we think it's important that you think about that energy usage as you make these selections of green products.
Likewise, we had assumed that we would put a gas stove into our new kitchen, and then just became aware of the dangers and environmental issues with natural gas, otherwise known as methane, and just how much more efficient induction stoves are, as well as being electric, fossil fuel free. I feel like there are just several things. And refrigerants. I listened to the How to Save a Planet podcast while I'm puttering around the garden. They had an entire hour-long episode about the impact of HFC refrigerants that, who knew the impact. They've recently changed the laws around this, but that is like another thing that, we should look into that when we're getting a new refrigerator. But unfortunately, what I wish is that there were like a showroom where you could go and see all these samples and see all these products and have these comparisons. So they're a business idea for someone.
My hope for this house is we have a great living experience for our family. We have 2 kids. We want to enjoy the space, but we also want to feel good about the space we're living in. So that's kind of the primary desire here. At the same time, it would be wonderful if we kind of help others make decisions that take them a little more green in their construction. So working with our great builders, our great architects, like they really have worked with us to think through every single aspect of it. And I believe that they're learning as much on these projects as we are, and hopefully they take those off to their other projects as well.
And that we can collect enough data along the way or through instrumentation built into some of the systems that can help other people make decisions and learn from that as well, the ripple effect.
My name is Matthew Kushel. I own Boss Corp Design and Build. We're the general contractor on the project. We've worked with Joshua and Rachel dating back for 10 years. And we've worked closely with SV Design, the architectural firm, on the project to design everything from the foundation up. I think one of the keys that I want to have everyone take away from today is that it's really a team process and involves all the stakeholders, from the town in the permitting section. The homeowners really pushed us in this case to be on the leading edge, the designers and the architectural firm as well, us as the builders. And I think a very important point for everyone is that in addition to designers and engineers, a great resource for a lot of the latest information, the most accurate information on these types of building applications is going to the manufacturers. For example, Rockwool, who we'll talk about with all the envelope construction, companies like them have very large research and development departments, very large engineering budgets where they put into all the design of this. They can answer questions very general to the very specific in your application. So really, I encourage everyone to reach out to them throughout the process. For the process of reducing the negative environmental impact of construction, not only from the construction process, but also from the energy use throughout the use of the home, we really want to look at it from all phases. So the earlier you can start in the design process, the better. It's certainly never too late, and it's not an all or nothing. This project in general is great because it takes everything from foundation all the way through roofing into the finished selections, but you can certainly pick and choose. I will say, as much as you can plan it early with the design team, with the architectural team, speaking to manufacturers and getting their envelope design, the better. But again, it's never too late to start. Sure, so from this house, from the green perspective, it really starts, as I mentioned, at the foundation. That goes from extra insulation on the exterior of the foundation, including under the foundation as well, the exterior walls, as I mentioned. We carry that all the way through the envelope on the exterior of the roof and the walls. We can look at some physical mock-ups of that construction in a moment. It also carries the insulation all the way on the interior and then carries all the way through to finish selections. We can talk about using reclaimed wood flooring throughout, recycled materials for the exterior siding, the roofing, recycled material for the countertops, other finished selections like that as well. So it really is an entire comprehensive package of the entire property. One of the things we have here is a physical mock-up of the particular construction building envelope in this home. Right here is the first layer of plywood. On the inside of this will be the closed cell spray foam of the walls, of the roof. And at this plywood is where typical construction would essentially end. On top of that, we have this product by Rockwool. It's called Comfort Board 80. So it's a Rockwool-based insulation product. It adds 4.2 R value per inch. We have 4 inches total, 2 layers of 2-inch here. We have our framing members to keep an air gap between the hot and the cold roof in this application, and then a second layer of plywood with underlayment, moving all the way to the roofing shingles, which are a recycled-based product produced by a company and a plant that aims for net zero in their production process. So again, as you can see, it's an entire systems-based approach. And to reiterate again, reaching out to the different manufacturers, such as Rockwool and EnviroShake, the producer of these roofing shingles, they become great resources to help the design team engineer this. So here we have a physical mock-up of the wall construction. Again, starting from the inside here, we have the closed cell spray foam insulation and then our exterior sheathing plywood. In a typical construction, this is where that envelope would end and the siding would be attached right to that. In this application, we have the Rockwool insulation, a layer of 3-inch here. We have what we call a rain shield that provides protection against moisture and air. And then we actually have a product by Richlight, which is a recycled-based siding product here. So again, you can see not only from an insulation value, but from the using recycle-based materials in both the siding and the trim to reduce the environmental impact of the construction and then of the future use of the home as well. Yeah, I think a couple great things you could look at as standalone projects. One of the probably most effective is insulating your roof, your attic space. If you don't have that already. There's incentives for that. There's lots of companies out there that can provide quotes for free, energy assessments as well. That's a very high impact project that can be isolated without really disrupting your active living space or anything. Other options for projects like that are looking into your appliances, using induction as we are in this project, using heat pump-based dryers as opposed to either fossil fuel-based or other electric-based conventional ones. And on the finish end, again, using reclaimed product and recycled-based product as well. I think one of the most exciting things about this trend moving to the green building is that we all share the concern of reducing our impact in our daily lives. Here we're doing it at work for the environment. Construction has a significant environmental impact, usually very deleterious. So the more that we can do to reduce that in the construction process, and then also for the end use of the home, we can certainly all feel better about that. I think the most exciting thing about this particular project is the HVAC use and the amount of recycled-based product that's going in. I mean, the entire home on both floors is going to have literally torn down barns reclaimed as the hardwood floor. And then the recycled-based product for the exterior siding is something we haven't worked with prior, and I think will be a lasting trend. So the only other thing I think I want to say is one of the other key points is things that might have been preconceptions as very recently as 1, 2, 3 years ago can be totally changed. People thought with certain types of electric-based heating, electric-based cooking, some people had a negative connotation with them. Everything that you might have heard 3 years ago can be totally changed. Same thing with insulation, the type of insulation, the way it's processed. So if you're undertaking a project as a builder or a homeowner, or as an architect, really look in, even as often as every 6 months to see the current state of technology and product availability.
So I'm standing here in front of one of the air source heat pumps that serves the living conditions of this house. We're looking at a vertical mounted unit, and this unit has the ability to have refrigerant pipes connected to the outdoor heat pumps, and it also has, in the case of an extremely cold situation, the ability to put some backup electric heat on those very cold days, a handful of days per year. Another element of this system is the high efficiency air filter that's at the bottom. So as air comes back from the house and back into the system, it's filtered before going out. We have also on this residence horizontally mounted heat pump units. This is the horizontal configuration, and it's a little bit more streamlined. It's for smaller areas, in this case a smaller zone. Over here we have a air source water heater. It's the second of the 5 forms of heat pump systems that we have here. This takes air from the basement to heat the water, and in the process cools the basement and dehumidifies at the same time. We're up on the 2nd floor now, and a couple things I'd like to point out is we have up in this area an ERV, which is an energy ventilator recovery. We also have one of the air handlers. And you'll also notice a lot of the ductwork that's up on here. The first item, the energy ventilator recovery, does a couple things for the house. One is because the house is so tight, we want to be able to make sure that we exhaust stale air in the form of carbon dioxide from people breathing, and also any odors, cooking odors, bathroom odors. So we pick up all of those air that we want to throw away up in this unit. But before we throw it out to the outside world, we capture as much heat energy and as much humidity energy out of that unit, out of that air, and we impart that energy back into the air that's coming back in to freshen up the house. You'll notice up this ductwork, we see a lot of ductwork that's up close to, or in some cases up in the rafter space. And what's important is the envelope that the client is building with their builder here allows us to do that, because we still are inside the envelope of the house, so we don't have to worry about energy being lost to the outside world, which means we can take advantage of spaces, interstitial spaces like this that would otherwise be unuseful to the client, and we can put our equipment up in this area.
Well, I have big hopes. I hope that my grandchildren, who are 5 and
Okay. Thank you. You guys are awesome.
Thank you.
So we're going to open this up to some questions. I don't know that I saw questions in the chat, but you could start by just raising your hand. Yes, Sally.
Yeah, I just wondered to Todd, in terms of promoting this to other people, how does it compare to the quote normal cost, what you're doing, what you just did? How would it compare to have done it the usual way?
So we clearly spent more money than it would have been if we'd done it, as you say, the normal way.
Right.
But it's a little difficult because part of the extra money we spent was to preserve the historical structure, the post and beam structure. Another big chunk of money we spent, which actually had an energy benefit, we dropped the old floor of the barn by almost 2 feet, which meant that the sides of the garage area was 2 feet more underground, which meant that the building at that lower level was going to retain more heat. We honestly didn't do that for an energy reason. We did it so the driveway wasn't as steep, and as we age, we didn't want to have to climb that driveway or have car doors slam on us as we got out of the car, but it did have an energy benefit. In terms of the actual cost for the installation, my guess is that the payback, when you adjust for all the other things, is probably, I don't know, on the order of maybe 7 years. But to us, it was both the fiscally the right thing to do because we plan to stay here for a long time. And it was obviously, from our point of view, the right thing to do from a climate perspective. Yeah, it's more money up front, but I got to say, I have training early in my career. I was a certified public accountant, and I know how to do time cost of money calculations. And when you looked at what we laid out more up front and what we were going to save in energy long term, we think it pays off well. And that was, I should say, at lower rebates than there are today. If we did that same project today, we'd get more money back in rebates.
Do you have another question? You'll have to unmute yourself, Sally. You're still muted.
Well, Sally's working on that. I will just add to what Todd said. It shouldn't be looked at as an all or nothing. Every single dollar you put in can be looked at as to what you get back, what the ROI on that investment is. And if you have $5,000 to invest in adding some sort of environmental benefit to the way that your house is built, where would you put that? If you had $15,000, where would you put that? All the way up to, if you have hundreds of thousands of dollars, there's always more you can do, but that doesn't mean doing a little isn't worth it. So literally, I think there's a way for everybody to make a small to a large investment and get a small to a large return on that.
Yeah, and I will also add, I think I even just heard the statistic that the way that people think about heat pumps, they always think about it in terms of the sticker price, but that's really the wrong way to think about it. You have to think about its cost versus its savings over the lifetime of the product. And I mean, unfortunately, it depends on whether it's the homeowner or the builder who's going to be paying that and getting the return. It isn't always well matched, I guess. But
And one thing people often overlook, they think about that initial cost and maybe here are the annual energy savings, but the maintenance costs of a lot of these new technologies are much cheaper. So for example, other than changing filters in the last 3 years, we haven't spent any money for anyone to service that HVAC equipment. If we had a gas or an oil boiler, I'd be spending a few $100s every winter, every season, every fall to have them come in and look at it. You don't have that with these pieces of equipment.
Right. No, I understand that the long term, you end up ahead, but I'm just wondering in terms of helping convince other people, is it like a third more, a half more, 3 times more? I mean, how would you calculate just at the beginning, just not what it saves you, but just what it costs up front?
Yeah, I can give you an example of the hot water heater, which is a hot water heat pump. The particular European model that we bought was probably about double the cost of a conventional electric water heater, which in and of itself is a little bit more than a gas water heater. But again, zero maintenance, zero service calls, zero problems with it, and lower energy costs. So that'll probably pay for itself in I don't know, 3 to 5 years, that differential.
Thank you.
Layers of
Thank you.
insulation. I'm sure, I don't know what the number is, but I will say from we live in Todd and Deborah's barn right now. We're the tenants. It's extremely comfortable. The heat almost never comes on, even unless it's very cold out and there are no drafts. Those are things that are hard to quantify.
Okay, thank you. Lisbeth, I think you raised your hand.
Yeah, I think the money question is really on people's minds. You know, how's it going to be before and after? But I think that there's also a big, I guess I'll call it an emotional component. Even with people who would really like to do this, I think they're scared of change. We all know people are afraid of change, especially those of us who work on climate issues. So, and what you did tonight is inspirational. But so I'd like to ask you all, you too, Janice, what would you, how would you encourage someone to get started? What you said, Josh, to take a step is a good idea. But for people who are really going to be overhauling their whole system, it's a little bit overwhelming.
Yeah,
I've talked to people about that.
If we had done nothing and we were like, what's the first step we could do where it's something you can bite off and feel comfortable with, I would 100% look at heat pumps, right? Like, and there's lots of different types of heat pumps for lots of different types of uses, but I would look at, home heating heat pumps. And if you're coming from oil or gas, it's actually a pretty quick return on your investment for that. So with the rebates that are out there now, which are unbelievable, rebates offered by the state and federal, couple that with the fact that you're not going to be paying for fossil fuels. So you won't have a gas bill, you won't have an oil bill, which are variable, relative to what we're paying on electricity in Lexington. Our electric rates happen to be very good compared to the rest of the state. When you put all that together, like you should be able to make that project make sense in a couple of years of payback. It's not like, you're looking 7, 8, 9 years. And the big fear with heat pumps that heat pumps can't operate in a cold climate is just no longer true. And so they're using heat pumps all the way up through northern Canada. They're using them up through Maine, like Scandinavia. They're the most common type of heating, and they have harsher climates than we have here in Boston. And so our heat pump, actually, Todd said -5 on the video, but it's actually -14 degrees that our heat pumps operate to. And that means they operate better than a standard resistance electric heater would at -14 degrees still. And then on top of that, when the newest ones that are coming out can go down to -25 and even -30. They just announced a couple that go down to that level. So you don't need a backup heat source anymore. You don't need to worry about what happens in a -10-degree day. It's going to work. It's going to keep your home nice and warm
And cool in the summer.
and cool in the summer, and it's going to pay off. So all of the fear that I think a lot of the oil industry has spent a lot of money trying to convince people that heat pumps can't be your only source of heat, like all of that is not true anymore. And we really should kind of move past that and message that they are the best way to heat your home, even here in Boston.
Yeah.
Part of that is just new refrigerants that just are more efficient, right?
More efficient technology,
Yeah.
better designs. And if I can, on the basic subject of being scared of something new and different, let me just say this. I mean, I've spent my whole career, my whole life around technology and new technology. And I can understand how a lot of people would be scared to, well, this is the thing they've known for 50 years. Why do this new thing? And I would just say that, as Joshua was saying, there are a lot of things that, you can say they're very different. I'm not familiar with it. Should I do this? 10 years ago, honestly, I would have said yes to the insulation things, no to some of the early heat pumps in the field. But that's not what we are today. I mean, I think from about 5 years ago on forward, the technologies have been much improved, are very resilient, and as I've been saying earlier, low maintenance. And I don't think there's anything left to be scared about. The things that are being built and sold today, they've gone through years of debugging and are very effective.
I would say another thing is, I mean, the comparison is burning something in your house. That doesn't seem scary.
Yeah.
Thank you. These are excellent answers. Thank you.
Well, the other thing I'll add on heat pumps is often people start with bringing in an HVAC company, and HVAC companies don't always have the same knowledge, the same opinion. They haven't researched the systems to the same level. And so, often an HVAC company will come in and they'll try and implement the same exact solution in every house, but that doesn't always make sense. If you have forced hot water inside your house, there are air to water heat pumps. Nobody talks about those. People rarely buy those, but they work. There's actually a wonderful manufacturing company up in Canada that makes a really good unit that does air to water heat pumps. So you don't have to replace your baseboard heaters. So that's one great way to use heat pumps with minimal changes in your house. There are air to air heat pumps. That's what we're using in our houses. And they don't require you to have a cassette in your ceiling or to have a wall unit in every room. We're doing a central system. So they go through traditional ductwork and you don't see it. And so people always say, well, I don't like the mini splits, but the mini splits are just one solution. There are ways to implement this into existing ductwork or into existing forced water systems, so you don't have to change any of that infrastructure in your house.
If you have a builder come in and say that, oh no, you can't do that in this house, that's exactly the time when you say goodbye and you find another builder. So I will tell you, there's probably 10% of the builders out there that are current with the kinds of things that Joshua and Rachel and Deborah and I used in these two buildings. And the other 90% are still learning.
Oh.
And so you need to find someone who is either willing to talk to the manufacturers and learn what they need to do the job right, or have already done 10 or 20 jobs right today.
Yeah, and if you want to think more about scary, I mean, we had oil heat in our old house, and a line had a leak in it. We ended up losing 400 gallons of crude oil, or home heating oil under our house.
Yeah.
And that took 4 years and $425,000 to clean up.
Read about the the dangers of burning natural gas in your home.
Yeah, I mean, for 50 years, we've been told by the natural gas industry that unventilated natural gas stoves were safe, which I didn't believe ever. But it turns out they're highly hazardous, produce carcinogenic vapors in the house, and even with really good ventilation are not ideal, which is why Joshua and Rachel have gone, what's the technology you're?
We're doing induction.
Induction, yeah.
Which is.
All right, thank you.
But-
Roseanne, I think you raised your hand.
Yes, Joshua, what's the company in Canada that makes the water to air heat pump?
Air to water.
Sorry.
Norse Hydros?
No,
No, not Norse. Sorry.
Or give me 30 seconds and I'll look it up and then I'll interrupt with the name.
Oh, good, thank you.
Suresh, would you like to say your question, or would you like me to read it? He says, where should we start if we have $10,000? In other words, if you have only $10,000, where should we start retrofitting an existing fossil fuel home? Because the last time I looked, about 2 years ago, a heat pump required more than $25,000 initial investment.
It depends on if you're changing out everything for the heat pump or if you're just changing out part of your system. If you're just changing out the main unit, the heat pumps themselves range from $4,000 to probably $8,000 or $9,000, depending on size.
You mean if you have existing ductwork?
If you have ductwork or if you have forced hot water systems in your house. Because then all you're changing is really the mechanical system. You're not changing the way that the air or the water is distributed through your house. If you need ductwork or if you need additional radiators or stuff like that, then there's additional costs for that. But those aren't unique to the heat pump itself. And then with the heat pump, you're also getting the rebates. So I can't remember what exactly the current rebates are, but I think it offsets almost 50% or more of the heat pump cost at this point.
Yeah, the rebates are big. And one other thing I should say, if anyone listening decides to talk to a contractor and they come in and they say, well, it can't be done that inexpensively right now because you need a high temp heat pump, air to water unit. All three of the major US HVAC companies in the next 18 months are announcing high temp heat pumps that make some of these conversion things in an existing home even less expensive than it is today. So I would just say, if you don't hear the number you like from 2 or 3 builders, call someone back in 12 months.
And I posted the name of the company. It's called Arctic Heat Pumps. But they're not the only ones making an air to water heat pump. And then, by the way, there's the whole category of water to water heat pumps or geothermal. And they have a great, solution as well. We actually use both types in our house, geothermal heat pumps and air source heat pumps, for different reasons. Geothermal does have the added cost of having to drill the wells. And so that is, if you think about the cost to install geothermal, you have about a third going to well drilling, a third going to mechanicals, and a third going to the ductwork or the piping for your forced hot water.
By cost, he also means emotional cost. Big truck, big hole, a lot of noise.
We didn't mention this earlier, but people think about cost or what to be scared of. Before we did the project, we had a wooden frame barn, and if we were going to put gas or oil heat into it, we'd have fire sources. We had a gasoline powered snow blower, a gasoline powered leaf blower. When we finished the project, there wasn't anything flammable in the building. We, in fact, both of the cars in the garage are electric vehicles. We now have an electric lawnmower, an electric leaf blower, an electric snow blower, and all electric heat and air conditioning to the apartment. So in terms of fire risk, and we have a full fire smoke detection system, hardwired, but much less likely that it will ever go off, except, as our tenants can admit, when the little batteries go dead.
So I actually have a question for you, both of you, and in your case, Josh and Rachel, I think one of your contractors talked about this. You've talked a lot about how critical it is to have a tight building envelope on the outside. That probably makes more difference than anything else you could look at in terms of bringing down your heat load and making it easier and less expensive to put in heat pumps or anything else. But you also mentioned that a lot of HVAC contractors, they don't even know the things you knew, Todd, about how to get a tight seal on an existing building. So I wonder if any of you have any suggestions for the rest of us, guidance on how perhaps to educate those who would be tightening up our building but may not know what you know.
Well, I think what made a big difference for us when we finally narrowed it down to one contractor, it was obvious to me the whole relationship was going to work well. Because when I brought up a particular material that I wanted to use, instead of getting pushback to use something else or to not focus, and I was very clear about that tight sealing envelope, the builder brought in, and I think I mentioned this in the video, he brought in the manufacturer of the insulation, but he not only did that, when that insulation manufacturer said, well, if you're going to make real value with this, you also should make sure that each pipe entry for plumbing, for ventilation, for an exhaust fan is tightly sealed. Every single, they said, okay, well, how do we do that? And then he investigated that. And when the crew showed up and the frame was done and they started doing those penetrations, rubber gaskets were put on the building in about 15, 20 places. In fact, even when a wire went to an outdoor outlet, that wire goes through a rubber gasket, so there's no air leakage into the outlet fixture. So how to do that? You've got to find a builder who, when you tell them you want a tight seal and you say, well, we want to have, if you say something like, when the project is done, if you're going to affect the whole house or a good part of the house, you want to have a blower door test. Well, then the builder's going to know that he can't cheat, because blower door tests don't lie. A blower door test is when they put a fan in a doorway and go through a process of pressurizing the inside of the house, and they have computerized sensors that pick up the air leakage. And so we had that done when our barn apartment was completed, and it identified one place that there was a leak under a door threshold, which was fixed. And so you find someone that knows either knows the things or is willing to learn them. And if not, you tell them that you're going to have that test, and then they go out and they figure out how to do it right.
So Janice, I think your question is really interesting, and not just because it's the right question to ask, but because there's two situations. Todd and I and Rachel and Deborah were in a situation where we basically were tearing apart the existing structure all the way down to the studs and rethinking the entire engineering from inside to out. But that's not what most homeowners are doing.
Well, I'm going to jump in and say that wasn't our original intent. Once we got to a certain point, it was like, okay, well, let's do the rest of the house and so we can insulate.
But most homeowners are thinking, what can I incrementally do? What's a small step I can take? How do I better improve the envelope? And that's really about, how do you tighten things up? And so there are solutions there as well. Todd mentioned a HERS rater, HERS. I actually recommend starting with that and having them come out and telling you where your baseline is. And they'll really look at everything. They'll look at the systems, they'll look at the way the house is built, they'll run some tests, and they can make recommendations where you'll get the most bang for your buck. Maybe that means insulating the floor of your attic based on the construction of your house. Maybe that means turning your attic actually from a cold attic, meaning that it allows air to flow to the outside, to a hot attic by insulating into the roof and changing that flow. Maybe it means, pulling out your windows and redoing your windows. Maybe that's the biggest point of leakage. But really, it's getting the data rather than just kind of taking a stab in the dark. And you can call any insulating contractor out there, and they'll drill a bunch of holes in your wall and spray in insulation from the outside. That's not going to solve your problem in most cases. It's better to start with someone whose entire job is to help you figure out how to create a tight envelope. And then they'll make recommendations for where the best thing you can do is.
I'm going to jump in also. We were not planning to do a lot of the things that we did to our house until watching Todd and Deborah, and then even living in the house, just getting a lot of recommendations. So we're trying to pass that forward to some degree. But we'd used our builder before and had a high level of trust that we could ask him a question and he would go off and research it, and we wouldn't have worked with him if we didn't feel that way in the first place. And he's gone out and gotten a lot of information just based on questions from us and Josh pushing him.
Thank you.
To Joshua's comment about the HERS rating, we did a small project, not on the barn, but on our house proper. And one of the things I discovered when we remodeled our bedroom, when we were changing the woodwork around the windows, was that there was no insulation around the windows. And not only was there no insulation, when I took the molding off, I could see light coming in from outside. So, when you have a HERS rater come in, they would find something like that and they would say, you know what, maybe the best thing you can do is just replace the interior trim on your windows, leave the windows in place, but seal around them. And our bedroom used to be the coldest room in the house, and it's not anymore.
Thank you. Are there some other questions? If not, I have a final one, which you've got 4 minutes to answer on all this, which is that this was filmed almost a year ago. 10 months ago. Are there any new particular insights you'd like to highlight of what you've learned since then that wasn't covered in the film?
I've got one really tiny one that's sort of interesting. Because we did such a good job insulating not only the apartment, but the garage, I've discovered that our electric snowblower batteries, if I leave them to charge in the garage instead of in the shed, that it's about 20 degrees warmer in the garage, and the batteries do much better and the snowblower does much better. Which we haven't had much opportunity to use it because I do not own an electric slush blower. I only own an electric snow blower.
So I think one of the things when you were at our house last time, it was in a very kind of early stage of construction. Now it's almost done. We're probably about 2 months from moving back in, and we're super anxious. But what we've turned our focus to is the other types of things we can do. And one of the things we're doing now is a lot of landscaping and hardscaping, and we're including rainwater harvesting as a component of that. We had talked about that back, when this video was filmed, but we've really done a lot more research now. We've brought in engineering experts and water experts to really think through the way that happens in the yard, the best way to put underground cisterns in, how to reuse that water to minimize the amount of water that comes off of our roof and leaves our property. We actually tried to get gray water, and I think we talked about this at the time, get gray water harvesting.
Laundry, just the laundry.
Just the laundry systems.
No soap.
We use no soap. We use the ozone solution. And unfortunately, there wasn't a great way to do that. The town wanted a lot of additional engineering around the ways to clean that water before it goes back into your garden beds. And so I would say if there's one thing we would push the town on is how can we work to kind of get answers to things like that? Because it shouldn't be that hard. Like there are inexpensive ways to implement it, but like nobody in the town had done the research to say, yes, that's okay, or no, that's not going to work. And I think if we could kind of get some of those things thought through and figured out, it'd be easier for homeowners to just say, I want to do that, and be able to kick off that piece of the project.
Yeah, the point that we were given the information, we assumed that it would be fine because it seemed to make perfect sense. It was an easy switch for the plumbing. But by the time the plumber came in and said, look, I need a yes or no, can I do this? We got the answer that we needed like an engineering study, and there just wasn't time in the schedule to accommodate. But I will add to my insight is that figuring out what is green or the greenest option isn't always as obvious as you would think. I mean, one thing we already commented we're not doing is the size of our house, but we could have bought a lake house. We're not doing that. So there are different ways to look at things. I'm not trying to justify the size per se, but I mean, building materials are another area that's complicated. There's a lot of recycled materials, but they might be made of like, concrete or resins, cements. I mean, that may be more energy intensive than just collecting stone from out in the wild. So just getting more information on some of these things that's clearer, that isn't from somebody who's manufacturing it and trying to sell their product would be really helpful.
Okay, thank you. I'm urging all of you to read the chat because there are some other questions. There's a number of suggestions for everybody. And now I see that Maggie has joined us. Maggie, who is our wonderful town sustainability and resilience officer and the one who has put together the Lexington HeatSmart program. So Maggie's going to give us a quick introduction, and then several of us who are in the first cohort of HeatSmart advisors for Lexington will answer your questions along with Maggie and along with I'd say the Summers and the Burgers as well. So Maggie.
Great, thanks Janice. Thank you all for having me. I missed the beginning of the meeting, but it was great to hear kind of the tail end of the discussion there and hear the amazing work you all are doing have already done on your homes. A lot of great discussion. But I am here mainly to give a plug for the Lexington HeatSmart program that's designed to help residents transition to clean heating solutions, mainly air source heat pumps. So I'm going to just give a quick presentation of kind of what is the program, how does it work, And then, as Janet said, we'll have some time for questions. Just share. Great. And I also heard earlier today that my audio is a little off. If it's bad, I don't know if it's internet because of the storm, just let me know. Maybe I can turn my video off if that will help. But again, so just to give some additional context for kind of the town's goal inside of things and what created the desire to start Lexington HeatSmart. These infographics show where Lexington's community emissions are coming from, and almost 70% are coming from buildings, and that's a lot higher than the percentage in a lot of other towns. Maybe in part because much larger homes, maybe because of more energy intensive businesses like some of the labs and medical offices and things like that. But if we're to meet this townwide goal that was set as part of the Getting to Net Zero action planning process to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from Lexington's residential, commercial, and municipal buildings, and to achieve a transition to renewable energy sources by 2035, that building sector is a huge area that needs to be addressed and one of those high impact areas. So just quickly, this was a kind of wedge diagram that shows the pathway to getting to net zero. This came out of the Getting to Net Zero roadmap plan that the town created a few years back. And just highlighting the fuel switching retrofits and energy efficiency retrofits as really high impact areas for existing buildings, and how we can by making buildings more efficient and switching fuels away from fossil fuels, we can really bring this wedge down a great deal. So that's really what the goal of Lexington HeatSmart is give residents the tools they need to be part of that transition. So the town's doing some of that work on their own buildings, but how can we also help residents do that work? So Massachusetts has the goal of net zero by 2050, and to achieve that, that would be looking at 100,000 homes converted to electric heating from fossil fuels every year. And a Boston Globe article a few years ago showed just how far off we are from that mark at this point. In Lexington, depending on kind of where that goal is, if it's 2035, that's around 750 homes converted to heat pumps. We're looking out to 2050, that's 350 homes converted to heat pumps every year. So definitely a major shift is needed, and we really need to accelerate that transition. Just lastly, on top of the climate kind of rationales for this, there's also a lot of rising energy prices that is pretty significant as well. And especially because Lexington has a community choice program that offers a much lower rate than the Eversource electricity supply rate. If you have a heat pump in Lexington and you're using community choice program, you're seeing much lower operating costs once you have the heat pump installed, especially compared to oil or propane. On top of that, this is kind of a great window of opportunity to consider heat pumps, because there are a lot of incentives both at the state and federal level. And I could send these slides around after, but this just kind of quickly outlines some of those incentives. So the big one for air source heat pumps are if you have a whole home system, $10,000 per home. If it's a partial home, it's kind of by tonnage instead. But also for ground source heat pumps, $15,000 per home. And there's more for income qualified applicants. And then at the federal level, from the Inflation Reduction Act, there's energy efficiency tax credits that can give you 30% tax credit back for select upgrades, which can include up to $2,000 for heat pumps or heat pump water heaters, and you can reapply for that each year. And then there's another one that applies to geothermal heat as well. And then again, there's kind of higher incentives for income eligible applicants. So all of that being said, I'm just going to go through what Lexington HeatSmart is, what it offers, and how you can sign up. So essentially it offers, the main piece is clean energy consultations with one of our 8 energy advisors, many of whom are on the call today, and all who have been trained by Abode Energy Management, who are kind of experts in this space. And that consultation, you can kind of talk through what your goals are, what you're trying to achieve, and they'll give you information about kind of what next steps make most sense. And they can kind of continue to guide you through the process as you seek out quotes and compare quotes and all of that. If you have a house that's kind of more complicated, maybe beyond the level of what your trained advisor knows how to advise, then there's also a number of hours that are available for expert consultations from someone at Abode, and your energy consult or your energy advisor could connect you to someone at Abode. There's also a quote comparison tool that you can use. So that's another service that Abode provides, and you can give up to 3 quotes. And I'll show an example of kind of what that report looks like, but they'll evaluate the reports so you can have a little bit easier of time sorting through the information you're getting back from the quotes. The website for the program also has a vetted contractor list. Right now there's about 17 contractors on that list. And those are regularly kind of vetted. And if we're hearing feedback that isn't so great about a contractor, or there's a new contractor, we are working with the Abode of kind of keeping that list up to date. And then finally, a website that has all this information consolidated, which looks like this. And that's been dropped in the chat already, so I'll let you browse through it if you want, but you can see kind of all the different pieces that are there. This shows what the quote comparison looks like, the report. So it kind of pulls out from the quotes all of the key pieces that you really want to look at. It rates them based on performance and sizing and operating cost, different environmental benefits, pulls out the key pieces that you want to see, like cost and net cost after rebates. So really is just a much easier way to digest what might be kind of complicated information. So if you're looking to participate, the first step I would say, even before participating, is looking into getting a home energy assessment. If you haven't already, the first recommendation your advisor is going to have is, have you gotten a home energy assessment? Have you implemented those recommendations? Because having a well-insulated home, tight building envelope is going to be essential before you install heat pumps. So you're really getting a properly sized system. But then, yeah, just think about kind of what are your clean energy goals, so you can go into a consultation and really get the most out of it. And then on the website, there's a intake form. You just fill out some basic information about your home and where you are in the process, and then you'll get connected to one of the advisors. And then if necessary, you might be connected to Abode for either another consultation or the quote comparison tool. And this is just our wonderful energy advisors, some that you'll see. And I think that is all that I have. So I will stop sharing, and I'm happy to answer any questions about like the program itself, but our energy advisors are also here for maybe more technical questions about heat pumps as well.
Thank you so much, Maggie. So Ken and I, Ken Karnowski, if you could wave your hand a little. We are 2 of the 8 initial advisors who went through an intensive training, which I wish I had known about and had available a year ago, almost to the day. We had our furnace and our oil tank carted out of our house, and we are now completely air pumps. And may I say, we made it fine through that terrible sub-zero, so I can quote on that. So we'd like to know what questions you have about the program, about HeatSmart, anything in particular about how to work with us. Ken, can you give a little bit of an introduction? before we start for yourself?
Sure. So I've been involved with and interested in combating climate change for a long time. So I was excited to have a chance to actually help others navigate through this, because it really is confusing. All of the questions that people are asking are just a subset of the questions that we're hearing as well. And each situation is quite different. But it does, I think the energy assessment and having somebody to help you know what questions to ask and how to evaluate the contractors, how to understand what equipment is appropriate, what does a tight house mean, and to actually look at your house and help you walk through that is really valuable. So it's been gratifying. I've worked so far with a half a dozen people. 2 of them are actually, one has actually submitted their quote comparison to Abode and is moving to making a decision. Another is a couple steps behind, and the others need a little bit more kind of support and nudging to keep going, because what we're finding is that everybody's situation is a little different, and nobody really has the time to do all the research themselves. So I think it's particularly interesting when people have questions. I'm learning from every single situation at this point. So, and I'm happy and excited to do the research, and we have great backup from Abode, which helps us guide you in the right direction.
We also support each other. We have all kinds of tools to support each other, which has been really great. Since the program launched, I should mention the public launch was just over 2 months ago, and we've already had 50 households sign up for the program, which has really been terrific. And so each of us has had like 6 to 8 so far consultations. And so we urge you, if you're interested, whatever stage you're at, is to fill out the very simple form, and Maggie will match you with one of us, and then we'll meet with you either virtually or in person for an hour and answer a lot of your questions, come up with some next steps, try to suggest some possible designs that might work, and then we take it from there, and we'll keep in touch with you as you go through the process.
And it really does start with, I think, as both Todd and Joshua mentioned, getting building your house as tight as possible. And the good thing, I think if you saw in the chat that Cindy mentioned that, most of those steps and measures are covered by Mass Save. You can get free weatherization and a large percentage of your insulation costs covered. So it will cost you less. You may not get to the level of performance that Todd was talking about, but your house will be doing much better. And what that means is you'll be spending less on the heat pump equipment, because you may need a smaller system, and the operating costs will be lower as well. So it's absolutely worth doing it on the first step.
And I should
also,
it's
oh, go ahead. Janice.
No, finish, Maggie.
I was
please.
just going to add also, in addition to some of those incentives, Mass Save also offers a 0% financing heat loan. So you don't have to kind of front that cost. And it now goes up to $50,000. So if you're looking for financing options, that's also available.
I just want to add from personal experience that just for the air conditioning alone, it was life-changing to move over to heat pumps. And I will say that in terms of cost, because I'm sure people wonder about that our electric bill did not go up at all until the sort of depths of winter. And then it did, but it was still far below what our oil had cost. We have a small house, and our last bill last March was just under $1,000 for oil. So I wouldn't let cost deter you. Do you all have any other questions? Any questions for us?
Thank
Have
you.
any of you yet signed up on the program? I don't see familiar names there, but
Do any of you have suggestions or ideas about how to further spread the word about this program? I mean, most of the people here are plugged into LexCAN in some way, so you're already kind of motivated to do something about this, or maybe along the path, or you heard about this session. But it would be great if we had, we're at the breaking point where the energy advisors couldn't keep up with the demand, and we're not there yet. So, yeah. If
And
you have
Roseanne,
ideas about how we can help spread the word. I mean, Maggie's doing a great job, and it's going out in the newsletter, and the town is doing what it can, but I think maybe there's more we can do.
Roseanne, you raised your hand?
Yeah, great question, Ken. Has it been posted on Lex Mavens yet?
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
Okay, that's a really good
you.
way to get the word out. And then I heard in a prior meeting, there's now a men's group in Lexington, similar to Lex Mavens. So both of those on Facebook.
Called the Mavericks.
There was a lot of echo.
Hey. Those are great suggestions. Thank you.
Also posting it at the library, if it's not up there yet.
For reactions.
That's a good idea as well. Thanks.
I think, are we muted?
Yeah. So no, we're not.
No, we're not.
If there's a financial argument to make to anyone, or if you hear of somebody who's talking about a construction project, just mention it in person. We'll look at it, but
Yeah.
it's a slow process.
The other thing I thought we're hoping to have a block party of sorts in our neighborhood this summer. And I know I'll certainly talk about it. I'm sure Joshua and Rachel and Deborah will also. So maybe to identify block parties that happen around town.
Yeah. Maggie, maybe we could build create a poster that's durable that we could kind of make available to block parties and let them know that they can have something where people, a poster plus a sign up sheet, or a QR code, with a QR code where they can go to the website.
Mhm.
Oh, Discovery Day is a pretty big block party.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
And we're working on getting an article into, actually we've been requested to do that into the Lexington Times, which
you guys
many
mark-
of us read.
March in the parade, get a banner.
I stopped reading the Minuteman some years ago, and then I stopped reading the Lexington Times, and I now look at the Lexington Observer online, and that's another place you could put something.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's a terrific resource.
Mm-hmm.
Any other thoughts?
Oh, Maggie, I was having two ideas. One, I like the Lexington Observer idea. They can either have an article, but I know they're nonprofits. If you have any funding for a few $100s, I don't know, maybe you put an ad there from the town. I don't know how it works with the town government. The other idea is that, I don't know if it's possible. I felt like our website, the town website, a lot of people access to look at their trash and look at their town events. If you could have it in a more prominent place there, and then so people can get your message, because if you have a goal of a few hundred homes each year to convert, that's a high order. So you need to, this information needs to be communicated, it's maybe as important as the trash. Maybe just right by the button for trash. They say, how many homes have been converted, that we have, so how many to go, whatever, I know the town website is a little stale, have a lot of rules, what you can do, what you cannot do. So yeah, so I just thought. Yeah.
Yeah, I do like that idea of like a target, a kind of like thermometer of where we are. I think that
One
would be
other
pretty motivating.
idea. I'm not sure if it's possible or not, but given that most of us source our energy through the Lexington electricity deal, do they get to put an insert into the bill mailer? Because that would be a really nice way to get it out to pretty much every home.
Well, especially people who are already interested in.
Yeah.
Energy.
Yeah, that's a good question. I've never asked. Could be worth looking into.
Or just a postcard mailer in general.
Yeah.
How much those cost. But
Definitely.
You're fantastic.
I'm going to jump in here and just point to something I put in the chat. If you know anybody who's looking for a part-time job, we are hiring a clean heat outreach specialist, which will help. All of the ideas that came up tonight, they all take time and effort, and we have gotten a grant from Mass Save for an education advisor. So we're hiring. I put a link to the job description. You know, if you know any young people who are looking for some experience for their resume, maybe they're in graduate school, or anybody who just wants to work part-time, they can dig into this, all of the availabilities, and kind of help enrich the program for other people. So please help us spread the word. Thanks.
Yes, and one thing about that is, in particular, we'd also like somebody who's interested in trying to reach out into some of the parts of the community that may not know as much about this, some of the lower income, for example, people, some renters and landlords of renters, so we can really make the benefits of heat pumps much more available to everybody.
Spring's coming up. Dress up as one.
Well, if there are no more questions, I think we'll let you all go and.
Janice,
hunker
Paul
back.
has a question.
Oh,
Paul
I'm
Chen.
so sorry, Paul. I didn't see your hand.
That's fine. I was just going to answer somebody's question about bill insert in the electric bill, and the answer is no. The community aggregation doesn't get to do that. If we want to communicate with electric customers, we have to do that directly. You know, there are these various association meetings around town. The one I'm most familiar with is the Merriam Hill Association, which occurs right before the town election every spring. And you might be able to get several minutes to talk about that and leave a little flyer or something for people to take home and maybe inspire them. And finally, I just wanted to ask about the air to water heat pumps. It seemed to me, from what I'd seen, that those work fine with warm floors, radiant floors, and where you have a fan driven radiator system, but that the water's not hot enough to work in the regular baseboards that we have, because it's like 120 degrees instead of 160 or whatever it is in the baseboard units.
Well, I think,
does whoever was pushing it have any information on that?
I guess I was going to give a more general answer, which is similar to what we heard earlier, is that the technology is rapidly changing. So I think the systems that did work were designed more for the standards that were available in Europe, which is a different temperature level than what's typical here. But manufacturers are adapting to the US market. And so what you say was probably true yesterday, may still be true today, and is likely not to be true tomorrow. So, but I don't, Todd may have a more specific answer to that.
Yeah, I can add, so Nordic, and possibly also the one Joshua mentioned, make high temp air to water heat pumps that heat the water to 160. The disadvantage that I know of with the Nordic one is it's referred to as a 2-cycle system, so that it can't also do air conditioning. However, the 3 big US manufacturers, including Mitsubishi and 2 others, are the ones that I was referring to, that within the next 6 to 18 months are all bringing out 160 or 165 degree high temp air to water heat pumps, which will make replacing old systems without changing virtually any infrastructure in the house possible.
And the only other piece, and yes, you're right, is traditionally it has been set to the 120 degree, 125 degree. There are a slight addition you can do to some of those units to send it through effectively a water holding tank or an expansion tank, and then increase the pressure in that, which further brings the temperature up to make it accessible for existing baseboard hot water. That's less common, and I'm not sure I 100% buy into that in terms of being a great long-term solution. So I would do a lot of research before you go down that path. But I know that there have been successful people that have done that. I do, though, believe a lot of the European standards are for 160, 165. And also, I believe these Canadian units do go to the high temperature as well.
Yeah, and there's actually, I think it's either a Finnish or a Swedish company that 2 years, well, a year and a few months ago, started producing and selling to 2 or 3 countries in Scandinavia an air-to-water high-temp heat pump. They have not yet brought that product. They're selling out at the maximum production level, so they have not yet gone beyond those countries into the rest of Europe or the United States. But in another year, we're going to see the U.S. manufacturers, and then I'm sure that company in Europe as well, shipping to the U.S.
And the baseboard systems don't give you air conditioning, right? Because it would just cause condensation on the.
Correct.
That's correct.
There's an issue with that. And I don't know what the options are. In our house, we have a boiler unit and a separate set of air conditioning, whole house air conditioning units. When we make the change in the main house, we're getting rid of the 2 outside air conditioning units, which go to a air to water, or I shouldn't say, coolant, refrigerant to air, and the boiler, which also feeds that same ductwork. All of that stuff will be tossed out in favor of one high temp hot water heat pump, which will then do the cooling as well.
Thank you. My nerdliness has been satisfied.
Okay.
And by the way, water to water heat pumps are, definitely capable of doing the forced hot water as opposed to the forced hot air. So, that they do have high temp water to water heat pumps as well.
Thank you all for coming. Thank you so much for walking us through your house and your barn. We look forward to the block party when you're done. And if we urge you, if you're even thinking about heat pumps, to look into the HeatSmart program, tell your friends. Todd and Rachel and Josh have offered to answer additional questions by email, which is terrific. And you're welcome to get in touch with any of us as well. So thank you all so much. Ricky, do you want a last word?
Nope. I want to reiterate thank you to our heat coaches, to Maggie for putting together the Lexington HeatSmart program, and for Todd and Deborah and Joshua and Rachel for allowing us in your homes to see a real life project being done. I was there when the tour was being done. It's very exciting to be inside a household and to see all the ways it's happening. It's magic. So I just wanted to reiterate a thank you.
And you can have magic in your houses too. So
plenty of magic to go around.
Thank you all so much, and good night.
Good night.
Thanks.